Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. If you can't, go ahead and type into the chat box and let me know that you're having problems. Otherwise, I'll assume that folks can hear me. Welcome. We're so excited to have you. This is the first webinar of the Feast Leadership Network for 2015. And I don't think we could have picked a more appropriate topic today. We're doing nutrition education, and that might resonate with some of our maybe communal New Year's resolutions. My name is Tracy Ganyu, and I am the newest member of the Community Food Systems team here at the Oregon Food Bank. And I'm really excited to be joining Sharon Thornberry and Spencer Masterson in their pioneering work to support communities to build healthy community food systems. So before we launch into our topic today, I just wanted to give you a really quick brief rundown on the Oregon Food Bank. We're a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to eliminating hunger and its root causes. Our incredible network of staff, volunteers, and partners work diligently to ensure that everyone has access to the food they need. OFB is also leading statewide efforts to increase resources and personal resiliency through advocacy, community food systems organizing, garden education, and nutrition education. And we began these webinars to support our network of FEAST communities, and that's you. FEAST stands for Food, Education, Agriculture Solutions Together, and it's a community-facilitated event that brings together all voices in the community to talk about their food system. We've hosted over 70 FEAST events in Oregon, and it's been replicated in 7 other states. As a result, we've seen the formation of food groups like the North Coast Food Web in Astoria and Santiam Food Alliance in Lebanon. And in other communities, we've seen granges revived, and in others, we've seen community gardens and farmers markets. And as the program grows, we want to grow with it and support this network of incredible food system advocates and organizers. The topics we'll explore in these webinars are really a direct result of what you want, and we're asking you to share what ideas you have, what would support your efforts to build community food systems in your community. I'm going to shortly type in a SurveyMonkey into the chat box, and that's an opportunity for you to share some feedback on how we can better support you. So if you have a minute, we'd really appreciate you taking the time to do so. So today, I just want to head over to our agenda slide, maybe. There we go. And so in the next hour and a half, we're going to go over our nutrition ed programs here at the Oregon Food Bank. We'll cover what Cooking Matters is. We'll talk about some of our satellite models and how they work. We'll talk about rural adaptations and how to incorporate cultural awareness into the classes. We'll give some other examples of nutrition ed programs, specifically demos. We'll end with how to get involved and do some question and answers at the end. And just keep in mind that we'll be selecting questions through the chat box. So anytime you have a question that you'd like to ask, please go ahead and type it into the chat box, and we'll take note of those. We'll go ahead and answer a few questions after each speaker, and then we'll save the rest for the end. So I wanted to do a quick introduction of our speakers today. I'm so excited to have them. One of them is my colleague, Kathy Block-Brown. She's the statewide education and training coordinator. After a career in education as a grade 2 university level instructor, teacher in jails and prisons, administrator, instructional designer, and trainer, Kathy jumped into the food world. She completed professional culinary training and opened a catering business focused on fresh, natural products grown locally or produced using sustainable practices. For 5 of those years, she and her husband were lunch ladies and gents, providing house-made nutritious meals to students in 2 Portland area school districts. Before joining the Oregon Food Bank, Nutrition Education's program team in April 2013, Kathy volunteered as a chef instructor in the Cooking Matters program. While at OFB, she has been a nutrition education program coordinator working with host agencies in Multnomah County to implement Cooking Matters courses and store tours. In July 2014, she became the statewide education and training coordinator and now works with communities around the state in their efforts to implement Cooking Matters programs. She also supports the school pantry team at OFB as they expand the number of food pantries offered at school sites in Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington counties by connecting pantry staff to nutrition and garden education and training resources for the families that use the pantry. She is also the lead for nutrition education volunteer training for the OFB Portland metro area. Our second speaker today is Mary Lou Gutierrez. She's the parent education coordinator for the Umatilla Moro County Head Start. Mary Lou has worked with Head Start for 31 years and has worn many hats. She was a WIC certifier and clinic manager for 15 years, has served as a social services case manager and parent educator for low-income families, and has been a home visitor connecting families to resources through Spanish translation. Currently, she does community outreach and parent education around health and safety, financial literacy, child development classes, and nutrition ed. Umatilla-Moro County Head Start has hosted over 24 classes in the last 3 years and 75 grocery store tours just last year. Her passion is of service to support parents so they can succeed with their children. Mary Lou leads with the heart, is passionate about her work and the families she works with. Her goal is to share knowledge with parents so they can be successful with their children. So without further ado, I'm excited to pass the baton on to our first speaker, Kathy Block-Brown.
Good morning, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be on the call with you today so that we can talk a little bit more about nutrition education, specifically about Cooking Matters. And I'm also delighted that one of our rock star satellite partners is on the call as well. That would be Mary Lou at Umatilla-Moro County Head Start. You're going to hear a lot more from her. It was important to invite someone who's actually a provider into the call who can kind of discuss some of the special issues that many of you might be experiencing if you decide to move forward with introducing or expanding nutrition education at your sites. But let's take a look at the mission of Oregon Food Bank and how the nutrition education program fits into that. So our mission is to eliminate hunger and its root causes because no one should be hungry. And the nutrition education and garden education program pretty much address that by looking at root causes and providing education and resources to folks who are hungry and living on a budget. So we take a holistic approach to that by bringing the community together in large groups, small groups, individually to provide food, education, and hope. And the way we do that in our program is through the Cooking Matters program. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that is. Okay, so Cooking Matters is a program of Share Our Strength. And Share Our Strength is a national charity that started quite a while ago, back in the 80s, by Billy and Debbie Shore in their response to the 80s Ethiopian famine. And they organized a nonprofit, the belief that everyone has a strength that could be shared in the global fight to end hunger and poverty, and also to focus on the United States. So they started as a fundraising and grant-making organization and added an educational component, and that would be Cooking Matters, then known as Operation Frontline, and that was back in the late 1990s. Over time, the organization's priority narrowed to ending childhood hunger in the United States. And the program helps meet that end by focusing on nutritional skill building for those who are in the primary food purchasers and preparers for themselves and their families. So looking at that educational component, let's take a look at how that has impacted those in hunger who are experiencing hunger on a national level. Cooking Matters offers signature courses, and since the 1990s, it is now available in 29 states, and the data back from 2012, which is just a few years ago, there were over 23,000 families who were impacted by this program. And it has 6 signature courses, which we're going to take a look at in a few minutes. And those programs are offered to those around the country through a lead partner. Oregon is the lead partner. Oregon Food Bank is a lead partner for Oregon, and we coordinate all the Cooking Matters programs that are implemented throughout the communities in our state. We're going to talk a little bit more about how that works. We have Cooking Matters at the Store, which is something new that came on board in 2010, and it is a 2-hour facilitated grocery store tour. So since that time, thousands of people have been impacted, and in 2012, over 9,500 alone. Then we also have what we call toolkits, and those were probably the first educational components that were developed by Cooking Matters. And they provide access for general community to begin doing nutrition education. So it could be chefs and kids cooking together, exploring food together, a variety of different titles. And in those toolkits, there are activities, there are recipes, there are instructions for whomever is facilitating that particular educational session. So let's talk a little bit more about those signature courses. So as I mentioned just a minute ago, there are 6 signature courses, and there are 2 what we call addenda for the Cooking Matters for Adults program. There's Cooking Matters for Adults. That's one of them in one of those in the that's circled with a red, and Cooking Matters for Families is the other signature course that's circled in red. And the reason why I circled those is those are the 2 programs that we use the most and the programs that we introduce first in most of our satellites and in the metro area with our host agencies. Each of the Cooking Matters for Adults addenda includes a special add-on, if you would call it that, for populations or classes where the majority of the participants have been diagnosed with diabetes or are pre-diabetic. And in those courses, we have a nutrition educator that's on board, someone who has a medical background or is a registered dietitian, and they can provide a little bit more specific information to that particular audience's needs. But in addition to those 2 curriculum, we have Cooking Matters for Parents. That's a brand new one that just came out last year. It was a modification from Cooking Matters for Adults. And the reason why we wanted, Cooking Matters wanted to do a different curriculum was they wanted to focus on reaching parents of children birth to 5 years old. So there's a lot more information about how to introduce good food practices early on, how to share food preparation and purchasing with your children, just gets a little bit more at what some of those needs are for those young families. We also have Cooking Matters for Kids, which is geared for just children in the grades 3rd through 5th grade. Cooking Matters for Teens, which pretty much is focused on preteens, so you're going to be looking at young people that are maybe 10 or 11 to 13. And then we also have Cooking Matters for Childcare Professionals, which is a special curriculum for those folks that are working in childcare settings and helping them know how to prepare food that is nutritious and healthy, and again, exposing kids to good food early on and giving them some real tools to be able to do that. The Cooking Matters for Families signature course is just what it says. It's designed for a parent or 2 to come to a cooking and nutrition education class with 1 or 2 of their children. So you have families together working in the same space, learning how to have fun with food in the kitchen. For each curriculum, there is an instructor guide which helps the team of volunteers be able to lead that course. The course is 2 hours each session for 6 sessions, and there's usually a chef instructor who is kind of the choreographer for what is happening in those 2 hours, a couple lead assistants that help set up, work in the small groups with all the participants, and a shopper. And all of the participants go home each week with a bag of groceries. And in most cases, there is, in the 5th class, a grocery store tour where the participants prepare menus and prepare a shopping list, and usually there's a grocery store challenge to find all the groceries that they need for that menu that they planned on $10. And they receive then the store card to purchase those groceries. So these courses are led by teams of volunteers, and that kind of gets back at that whole vision of Share Our Strength, is that this isn't about folks finding another spot for their staff, for another person on their staff to take over this piece or find more time in someone's already busy schedule, but it's about mobilizing the community and bringing people together who have a real interest in working together to end hunger and to be trained and volunteer their time then to give back to their community through this effort. Okay, so one other educational tool that I just briefly mentioned was Cooking Matters at the Store. And that is a facilitated grocery store tour based on 4 concepts: how to buy produce in 3 different ways, so fresh, frozen, and canned. And Cooking Matters viewpoint, and we support this, is that having people consume more produce is important. In what form? It depends on what's available and what their budget will handle. And do they need to use bus transportation to get to and from the grocery store? Or do they live in a rural community where they have to transfer frozen products over, a long distance and have to worry about them defrosting and such? So we talk about how to make that evaluation and which would be the best choice when they're in the grocery store, and how to buy whole grains, how to read ingredient labels and know what you're really getting in that package of bread that you're about ready to purchase, and how to compare unit prices. So the whole concept that bigger quantity is not necessarily less expensive. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it isn't, and so it's important to look at those little labels that are right on the shelf. So in the Cooking Matters for Adults series, or not series, but grocery store tour, every participant receives a participant booklet that not only reinforces those 4 key concepts, but it also gives each of the participants some resources. So when we're talking about seasonality, what does that mean? When are apples typically in season? And when is the best time to buy fresh green beans? But it also talks about how to store food. So you buy some things in bulk or in quantity and you want to put things in the freezer. Well, how do you really do that? Then at the bottom of that red circle, you can see what we call the facilitators flip book. And so all the facilitators of the grocery store tours, they have online training, and then they have this booklet that will help them have a script or just some cues of what to say as they go through the grocery store. And as you can see on the right side of the slide, these are the tools that I mentioned briefly previously. So Cooking Matters for chefs and kids, Exploring Food Together, Cooking Matters in your food pantry, and Cooking Matters in your community. We just did a food demo training last night with our nutrition education volunteers and some staff and volunteers from our Community Basket and Harvest Share programs. And we gave the Cooking Matters in your food pantry out as one of the handouts for their participation. And it's really a great product. It has some basic information about safety and what to bring to your food pantry, as well as some recipes and activities depending on how much time you have available to you. So here, I keep on pressing too fast. Here is a map that kind of describes how Cooking Matters has a national reach. And as you can see, There is a lot of concentration on the East Coast. Share Our Strength is headquartered in Washington, D.C., but it has reached out to the West Coast as well, and Oregon and Washington are very active. I would say Seattle, Oregon, the state of Oregon, and San Francisco are the three most active lead partners on the West Coast. And within those states, there are a whole variety of different kinds of groups that are involved. And some of the big national partners in the past few years are military bases, Head Start nationally, Catholic Charities, and some others. And you can take a look at the Cooking Matters website and get a lot more information. It's a pretty dynamic website where information changes on a regular basis. There's recipes, there's training modules, there's all kinds of really great information. Okay, you all are now witnessing my technology expertise. I'm pushing a button. Okay, so what is a satellite partnership? And as in the introduction, Tracy mentioned that one of my key roles right now is expanding Cooking Matters throughout the state. And what that means is helping communities around the state identify whether or not this seems like a good option for them, and what are all the resources, who are my potential partners within my satellite, because every satellite partner is a little bit different. It isn't, Cooking Matters isn't a product that we just pull off the shelf and hand out to people. It's just a tool that communities around the state can use to provide nutrition education to their community. And this is one way of how Cooking Matters can work in that collaborative way. You can see on the slide that on the left-hand side, there's Cooking Matters nationally, and the No Kid Hungry campaign is part of Cooking Matters. And then the arrow goes to a box that said lead partner, and Oregon Food Bank is the lead partner for Oregon. And so we work closely with the national office in getting updates on information, revised curricula, training. Very often there's grant funds that come to us or are made available to us from Share Our Strength, and we would receive those funds and then distribute them out to the community. And then you see the arrow going out to a variety of different models. One is in the local area in Portland, we have community partners, which we call host agencies. And so that could be Multnomah County Health Department, it could be a school district SUN program, a whole host of different kinds of host agencies. But we also, through our statewide efforts, have satellite partners. And those satellite partners may be the ones that actually implement Cooking Matters, or they may also reach out to other agencies in their community and coordinate efforts through those folks to actually implement Cooking Matters. Here again is a little bit more detail on how that works in terms of the kind of tasks that each of us have and our roles with each other. I mentioned what some of Share Our Strength's responsibilities or support is to us. One item I didn't mention is we do collect survey data from all of our participants in our classes, and in that third box down you can see that Share Our Strength provides evaluation and reports back about program impact. That's proved to be really useful for our satellite partners in securing funds, getting support from their boards to do this kind of work. So that's just one of the things that Share Our Strength can offer to us. Also, then the lead partner provides training and technical assistance. We order all the course materials for you. By the way, all the course materials and any of the participant incentives are all free of charge. That is Share Our Strength's commitment to us as a lead partner and from us to all of our satellite partners. And then the satellite partners obviously provide the administrative coordination to implement Cooking Matters curricula. I think let's go on to the next slide. So I'm going to turn this over to Mary Lou now, and she's going to speak to several topics.
And before we do have a couple of questions that are coming in, and feel free to ask a few now before we do move on to Mary Lou here. One question for you, Kathy, is do you have any examples of successful partnerships involving health departments?
Yes, actually we do. I mentioned Multnomah County Health Department. We started with them with just one course at one of their clinics, and it was and all of the participants had been diagnosed with diabetes or were pre-diabetic, and that was so successful, both in terms of the attendance of the participants, their connection back with their healthcare provider, and working out a medical plan between patient and provider, that we decided to have in the metro area to schedule a course every quarter with the health department. Then Family Care is another provider who has partnered with the Multnomah County Health Department so that we can make sure that we're expanding access to the patients that are part of either one of those plans.
Great, thank you. Another question we have that came in is, what do you recommend in terms of staff training prior to delivering Cooking Matters?
Well, that's one thing that we can help you with. If it's just Cooking Matters at the store, there's an online training program called the Learning Space. It was designed and is provided by Share Our Strength. That actually is a really dynamic, robust training tool. We have a pretty well designed training program here in the metro area that we are working with our satellite partners to modify to make sure that it really meets their particular needs. There are training modules on the Cooking Matters website, and in terms of background of staff, I would say that probably the biggest requirements are folks that are willing to work with the participants that we reach out to, that have an interest in healthy food, are willing to learn a little bit before they jump in. So there's no specific background. There is, in terms of the volunteers that you're recruiting, though, there is a message from Share Our Strength that, in terms of the chef instructor, that it be somebody who is professionally trained. Here at the Oregon Food Bank, we acknowledge that that is one type of individual that makes sense to be in that role, but we also know that chefs are very busy, and finding enough chefs to actually lead that part of the program can be kind of challenging. So having someone who is an experienced home cook who knows, has a passion for education and helping people learn probably is an equal, has equal opportunity for being really successful.
All right, we do have a few more questions here. Thank you so much for asking questions. We'll probably take one or two more and then make sure that Mary Lou has enough time to share her experience with us. She's got some really great information. Here's another question for you, Kathy. In the Cooking Matters curriculum, does every participant get to actively cook or get a hands-on experience, or is it more like a cooking demo
That's really a great question. Our goal is to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to touch food and work with food. So the chef instructor may do a demo, for instance, should do probably a knife skills demo. That person may do a demo on how to saute something so you get good, caramelization or browning on the food, so that adds flavor through just working with the food rather than adding fat, sugar, or salt. But after that, it really is really important for every participant to be able to cut and be able to cook, and then share what they've done, both in terms of eating together afterwards, but also what they've learned. So it's very much a facilitated event versus where the group is just watching someone else do that.
So I see a few more questions, and I'm really excited that some of you are asking questions for partners. So please feel free to use this chat box to connect with each other. We're going to take one last question before we move on here. Have you partnered with any Granges farms or farm workers?
Not to my knowledge, not by us directly, perhaps with one of our satellite partners, but in terms of seeing how the registrations for courses have come in, I would say no, but I don't see why we couldn't.
All right, opportunities are there. So we're going to go ahead and turn over the mic to Mary Lou Gutierrez, and she's going to be talking to us about rural communities and how to do some cultural adaptation. So can you hear us? Are you on the line with us? Mary?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I sure can. If you can't hear folks, go ahead and type into the chat box and we'll try to problem solve that. Go ahead, Mary Lou.
Are we set to go?
Yes.
All right. Well, we are located on the eastern part of Oregon, and we're pretty much very rural. So in working with Cookie Matters, we've discovered some challenges. For one, funding is a big culprit in trying to do some of these classes. But then at the same time, as agencies find out what we are doing as far as providing parent education, and when we talk about Cookie Matters and the challenges of the cost involved, and so that way every participant can walk away with the ingredients to the recipe, some of them have approached us and are interested, but once they find out the cost involved and all that, a lot of the times they turn away. But at the same time, the interest is there, and so we figure ways of trying to be involved within communities so we can get the funding. So the invitation is always open, you know, to extend that participation as to when and how they can help. If they can't help do a class or finance it, a lot of the time the volunteer is very much welcome. And that's worked out really good. One of the other challenges that we have is the facilities. A lot of the time some of the churches, even some of the schools, there's lots of rules and regs that go along with that. And the other is they're not large enough for us to do classes in there to do food demos and cooking. So we have been able to do classes to where, you know, the churches, they allow us to set right next to the kitchens where we could set up working stations and things like that to problem solve with that. The other is too, because we provide childcare with all of our parent education classes, a lot of the times facilities don't have extra rooms to do that. And so that we always have to problem solve when we're setting up these classes. And then the other big one is finding volunteers. A lot of the times I'm trying to abide by the curriculum, make sure that we have trained people and all that. The first year that we tried it, we were fortunate enough to get chefs, but then like Kathy mentioned earlier, you know, they have busy schedules, and since most of our classes take place in the evening, well, that becomes even harder for them to volunteer. But we managed to problem solve that by working with people in the community that have food knowledge, have worked in restaurants before, or have worked in the environment of nutrition education, and that has worked out really good. So even though we've had our challenges, we've learned to problem solve and try to involve community. You want to go to the next slide? Okay. So even though we've had our challenges, you know, once we got the opportunity to do this and expose it out there, it really has become a really hit in all the areas that we've done it. We started back in 2011 with CAPCO. We partnered with them. One of our directors was at a meeting and had heard about Cookie Matters and wanted to know about it, and at that time CAPCO was our satellite partner in the area. And CAPCO is a community action program in eastern Oregon counties, and so they provide a lot of services out there to low-income families. So we came on board with them, and we did Cookie Matters in the Hermiston area, and it turned out to be quite a success that we even wind up establishing waiting lists for this curriculum. So the following year, through Oregon Food Bank and interview follow-up that we had, we wind doing it on our own, being that our agency budgeted for it so it could be part of our agency's parent education. And so we managed to succeed with that. And then from there we started establishing, you know, having the cooking bins, having equipment, having all that on hand, so that way as we plan future classes, we didn't have to worry about buying stuff over all the time. One of the things that has helped us a lot too is that because I participate in a lot of Healthy Community Coalitions committees and stuff, they are aware of all the parenting ed that we do in all the different communities that we serve. And now we've even extended out to Union County. And so by doing that, once they find out that, you know, we can only do so many classes because of funding and all that, some of the other agencies have come on board. For example, Good Shepherd Foundation here, our local hospital, they wrote a grant so we can continue to do Cookie Matters in the areas that they serve as well as we do, which is Morrow and Umatilla County. One of the other agencies that has come on board is Salvation Army. They have written grants so they can continue to do Cookie Matters in Pendleton. So, you know, the funding piece is getting more and more known to the point to where I see that it's succeeding and expanding even more. One of the biggest partners within our classes is that Oregon Extension now is a huge collaborator in doing the nutrition and chef piece. They help a lot in doing those particular positions to where then I have to worry only about volunteers on someone to take the lead, make sure everything is there, equipment, working stations are set up and all that, and then a shopper. So that makes it much, much easier for us to be able to succeed with this class. This year, the other agency that has helped a lot is the CHIP program, which is the Community Health Improvement Project in Morrow County. They wanted to do a cooking class in their rural community, which is Hefner, and they had a success with that too as well, and they funded it also. And so we are going to be in meetings and see how we can plan again for the next coming year. Morrow County School District this year, our agency was able to do one cooking class in one of their small communities, but they wanted to have Cookie Matters again in Boardman, and so the school said, we will find the funding if you can still provide us with what we need and the guidance and all that. And by God, it happened, and these classes have started last week, and we've got a huge crowd attending. OCDC is another agency that has partnered with Umatilla Morrow, Head Start, and what we do in that situation is we take turns in hosting. One year they do it, another year we do it, and we collaborate by helping each other either with staff or childcare. The thing is, we want to have these classes taking place. The other agency that helps us a lot, we work very closely with our local food bank. And they always welcome us to come in because they know our purpose and mission behind with what we're doing. And so they've opened up the doors to us to check with them every week as we prepare for a class to help out in any way that they can. So those has been some really good opportunities that we have encountered in order to make Cooking Matters a success in our area. So want to go to the next slide? Okay. Now, I know in our communities we deal with different cultures and different races that we work with. In our area, the Hispanic community is the most prominent. And so one of the ways that we work in trying to incorporate cultural awareness into the nutrition education, we always start out by asking questions in order to find out what is tradition and common to them. The same with when it comes to selecting the foods that they eat. And because, like I mentioned earlier, most of our culture is Hispanic, most of the participants, they share that they eat what they were offered and or was available to them growing up. And so that's what they continue to feed their own families. The majority common foods in their diets are beans, rice, tortillas, salsas, and lots of meat. To them, it seems like a meat component has to be in every meal in order to make it a meal, has been their comment. Vegetables is something that's always been kind of limited to them, basically because it's just something that was not a norm in their diets even growing up. A lot of them do prefer to eat more fruits than vegetables depending where they live. And so this particular questions then lead us into talking about My Plate. It prompts into the pros and cons and their current diets. One of the things that participants share a lot of the times is that for them it's the lack of knowledge and education. If they have the ability to learn and be educated, they think that changes can be made. Most of them have grown up poor and eat what's available, and others say that vegetables and fruit were just not the norm for them. So by brainstorming and sharing ideas, then we can add and try the new foods that are incorporated into the recipes that Cooking Matters has. Now, participants are always very open to learn new ideas, ways to incorporate, something new into their diets. But then for them, sometimes the discussion leads into, changes really don't come easy sometimes, or they don't know how to do it. And this is where Cooking Matters has been been making a huge dent in helping people adapt and start trying new foods. For example, in one of our last classes, we've been fortunate enough to where the spouses or partners to some of these ladies that participate attend the classes. And there was one male participant that strongly believed that there has to be meat at every meal served, otherwise it's not a complete meal by his comments. So by the end of that class, he had a different view on his thoughts. That night we had prepared barley and lentil soup, and that recipe introduced a non-meat meal to this young man. He was sold on it, and he said, I can't believe it, this is so good and it has no meat. So we can make changes and we can continue to learn. And so I just cannot say enough about Cooking Matters and what it's done to a lot of our families. We do serve a lot of low-income families, and a lot of them keep saying, when is the next class? We tried to give an opportunity to everybody that signed up to the class to participate. Somebody had asked a question about whether everybody gets a chance to cook or just see the demo. In our situations, we've had classes between 10 up to 18, 19 participants. And when we have a large group, we want to make sure that we have the space adequate enough for them to all be able to participate, either by being at a workstation where they will do the slicing, cutting, or whatever is being called for the recipe, and others are by the stove, either ready to saute and continue the cooking process. but we try to involve everybody in one way or another. Usually there is a couple we ask that either or can participate so others have an opportunity as well. And then also I heard the question about whether or not farmers are involved. In our area we have a lot of processing plants, and so a lot of the times some of them are very open to donating onions or potatoes or whatever product that they are doing, and so that has helped us a lot. In Boardman we have one of the cheese factories. They're open to donating cheese. Some of the farmers, they donate potatoes from their fresh packs. Some of the processing plants, they donate onions. Whatever is available, they really are eager to find out how they can participate. So, you know, all we can continue is continue with the new challenges and continue to find more partners so we can continue making this Cooking Matters a bigger success and expand it more and more throughout our rural communities. Any questions?
Mary Lou, thank you for that. There are a few questions, so I'm going to go ahead and find those for you. One question is, and I think you just touched on this a bit, but if you have anything you want to elaborate on, is any attempt made to buy produce from local vendors or farmers? So I guess instead of donations, are you searching out to buy produce? And Kathy, you can respond to that too.
Okay. In many areas, because of the way our budgets are set, we get either corporate credit cards to go to certain stores to go do their shopping. But whenever we start a class, and if I'm aware, see, I come from a family that's been involved in agricultural harvesting and stuff like that, because my father was a labor contractor for many years. So I have connection to farmers and processing plants. And so I tend to make those connections before class starts so we can be able to do that.
And I would add,
we have tried, I would also say that in Pendleton, I know they connect to the farmers markets and to the vendors there to get their produce.
I would only add that, thank you, Mary Lou, that there's no requirement as to where you purchase the food for the actual making of the food in your class and the grocery bags that go home every week. So that's definitely a community decision, depending on what store you'd like to support or what farmer you'd like to support, a producer. Mary Lou just briefly mentioned farmers markets, and actually that is something that's beginning to get a little traction of doing Cooking Matters or parts of Cooking Matters classes at farmers markets. And it's a great place too for those markets that have a SNAP match. So our participants can kind of get a complete package. So instead of going to the grocery store on the 5th class of the series, they may go to a farmer's market. Or instead of going to a grocery store for the Cooking Matters at the Store tour, they'll go to the farmer's market. And it's really a great way to make that connection between the community participants and those vendors, providers, growers, ranchers, whatever in the community.
Great, thank you, Mary Lou and Kathy. Mary Lou, there's another question for you. Who have you found to do childcare during sessions?
Within our agency, we want to make sure that we use either our TAs, teachers' assistants. We want to make sure that who's doing childcare has done a criminal background check. We have some rules that have been established by our agency so we can make sure that we have safe providers.
Great, thank you. Here's another great one. Can you share experiences, if any, working with local tribal peoples, either working with individual Native people or with official tribal programming?
In the Pendleton area, I am sure that some of the participants that they have are from the Umatilla tribal, from the reservation here in Pendleton. I think, again, they start out by asking, you know, what is common and what is it that they eat, so that way they can incorporate what they're teaching into what is their common diets.
Great, and this question really ties nicely into what you just said. Does the Cooking Matters curriculum have set recipes, and can you share examples of how you add cultural foods to those recipes?
Well, a lot of the times, like when like for instance, when they prepare the brown rice and orange salad, it's one of the recipes in our Cooking Matters. When the food is prepared and then we ask for inputs about how they could probably fix it different and all that, a lot of the Hispanic community, which is we work with, they often talk about how they can incorporate different types of vegetables or fruits that are more common in their diets. The thing about it is that a lot of the times their concerns is making that change and the family wanting to try it. So they find ways, we talk about ways about how you can hide vegetables in what you're cooking, either cut it smaller. The thing is that parents are always bringing ideas about what they eat and how they can incorporate it. And or when they take the recipe home and challenge themselves, then the next session that we meet again, they talk about the different things that they did and what worked for them. And so that just tells us how they're incorporating these new foods that we're introducing with what they already eat.
Fantastic. So just to note, I have seen a few questions that are specific to county, and we'll try to address those one-on-one, so you can look forward to another email perhaps on that. And then one additional question for you, Mary Lou, is the curriculum available in languages other than English? Kathy may have an answer to that too.
I do.
Okay. Cooking Matters for adults is, in fact, that's been our most popular. I have done the Childcare, Cooking Matters for Childcare Professionals, and I did take it upon myself to translate some of the slides and the handouts, so my participants can also have equal access to that.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Also, the Cooking Matters for Family curricula is in Spanish, and I understand that the new Cooking Matters for Parents is also. So the two that for sure are not at this point are Cooking Matters for Kids and Cooking Matters for Teens.
Great. And there's a few other questions that we will hold that are more specific to Cooking Matters in general. So we're going to just transition over to our last topic, other nutrition ed programs, specifically food demos. And thank you, Mary Lou, for that. And Mary Lou will be able to answer questions here at the very end. But we're going to transition back to Kathy, who's going to tell us about food demonstrations.
So there's a whole variety of different ways that you can approach nutrition education in your community, and we've been speaking specifically about Cooking Matters, 6-week programs and 2-hour facilitated grocery store tours. But you can also kind of introduce the whole notion of it through food demos. And so let's talk a little bit about why you might choose that option first. Okay, so why do a food demo in the first place? To introduce new foods, especially if there are foods in your community that there's quite a bit of it and you want to help folks understand how to prepare that particular food, or as Mary Lou touched on in terms of introducing maybe a food that isn't part of someone's cultural experience, that would be one thing. Another reason is to demonstrate how to actually prepare that food. So last night we had a food demo training for volunteers who are going to be going out into the community to do this. And we talked about should we prepare a recipe that has a whole bunch of ingredients in it, or should we just prepare squash? Because that was the one food that we had available to us to work with last night. And so we decided that in the case of squash, it's probably just as important to help folks understand how to cut and peel a butternut squash, in addition to making a soup or roasting squash or mixing it with tomatoes and serving it over rice or whatever. So it really depends on what the product is, and know that there are a whole variety of reasons for actually choosing to do that demonstration. Also, it's a way to connect foods available at local pantries. So there are, food comes into the pantry without any predictability sometimes. Right now, Mary Lou, I bet in your area you have a lot of onions and potatoes. That's what we have in the warehouse right now. And so it may be that we want to help people get into the pantry and choose items that are from their community or are most available right now, and also know how to prepare them. So when you're thinking about doing a food demo, here are some questions that you might ask yourself before jumping into it. And that is, how much time do you have? That booklet that I talked about, Cooking Matters in Your Food Pantry, addresses this. So let's say you just have 5 minutes. Well, you might be able to do a sampling. You have the product in its raw form in front of you, and then you have samples that are already prepared that you're just handing out to people for them to taste. But then maybe you have a half an hour, and if you have that much time, you might actually be doing a mini lesson for folks who are maybe waiting at a pantry setting, waiting for their turn to get into the pantry to make their selections. So where will your demo be held? Do you have a kitchen that you're doing the demo in, or are you outside under a canopy with limited electricity? All of those from one end of the spectrum to the other and everything in between is where people have done demos, and so that's just something to be thinking about. What are your resources? So where will you get your food? Who could be your volunteers? Are you pulling from an existing volunteer base, or are you going to be recruiting new volunteers? Do you have recipes to hand out that will go with whatever product that you're trying to share with folks? Do you have those recipes available in multiple languages? Are they simple? Is it more of tips of, oh, you could make this into soup, or you could make this into a smoothie, or are you actually giving folks all the ingredients needed to make that and instructions on how to do that? Those are all choices that we all think through before we're actually doing demos. And what kind of equipment do I have? So if you're not in a kitchen, you may be using a hot plate or an electric skillet. Electric skillets are awesome in terms of making everything from something sauteed to soup. And oftentimes, in many situations, this is what our folks work with in their own homes, is a very limited supply of cooking equipment. And so actually demonstrating on that same equipment is a really important thing. And who is your audience? Are you going to be working with families or singles? What literacy level do most of the participants or the people going through the demo have, so that you are providing the resources afterwards that are in the right language and at the right reading level for people to really be able to use them. And also, what time do you have available to you, as we talked about before, and what skills does your volunteer need to have, and the equipment available to them. Those are all questions that need to get addressed before you jump into doing the demo. But our recommendation is start with sampling. So start small and work up to doing something more, if that's your choice, if that's what your local decision is to move toward. I might say, as kind of a side note here, is that probably the experts in food demos around the state are OSU extension staff, and they are in every county, and OSU has become a really strong partner with Oregon Food Bank has been for quite a while, but since two of the curriculum available in the Cooking Matters series are now authorized for OSU to use, we are working even more with OSU, and our satellite partners around the state are reaching out to OSU staff to bring them in as instructors or developers of interpretation of recipes or whatever their particular needs are. So it's all about folks looking at, well, what are my resources and what can I bring to the table and who's missing? Who do we need to invite into this conversation? And every satellite is very different in that regard. There, I went too far again. Okay, so before we get into general questions, let's talk about next steps. So obviously, since there are 60 of you that are on the call, that nutrition education is of interest to you at some level. So what do you need to do next in terms of thinking about, really getting into this service within your community? So the first thing to do is identify the need. Who would be the recipient, and how have you determined that nutrition education is something that would really be of benefit to those people in your community? And is nutrition education currently a part of your agency's mission? Or is that something that you want to begin advocating for? Because every agency is different in terms of what their priorities are, and that conversation needs to take place before you jump into this with too much energy. What are your resources in terms of time of your staff and volunteers? Is this something that could easily fit into the job description of one of your current staff? Or could you expand this opportunity to your volunteers? I can tell you it's a great volunteer retention effort that we have in the metro area, we have a very strong volunteer base and offering a variety of different nutrition education opportunities where folks can get out into the community and work for causes that they are passionate about has been really wonderful. And I know, Mary Lou, you can speak to that too a little bit with in terms of the volunteers or how you hear about your host agencies recruiting and retaining volunteers to do the program. Who are your community partners? What funds do you have? We've talked about the money needed to do Cooking Matters programs, and while all the materials are free and the participant incentives are free, we do require that actual cooking takes place in the classes. So finding a partner who can provide food or provide funds for food is really important. There are lots of different models for who does provide that that funding, and Mary Lou addressed a couple of those. Churches are a wonderful resource to tap into. We have one church up near where Mary Lou is right now that's working with OSU and another community partner, and they've already allocated $2,500 to get a Cooking Matters program started in the community. So those are some of the big questions you need to ask. Also know that it isn't a program where you pull a book off the shelf and then jump into it. There is some partnership development that needs to take place before you even schedule a class, and that's where we work together with you. And sometimes that takes a couple months, but sometimes it takes over a year to make sure that you have everything in place so that this program will be sustainable. Because it's a pretty intensive program, that you want to make sure that that this is something where people have made, a commitment. Obviously things can change, but initial commitments so that, in a year's time you'll still have the resources available to continue doing what you plan to do.
Well, thank you so much to Kathy and Mary Lou. We do have about 10 minutes left for questions. For those of you who wrote specific questions about the counties you're in, we'll have a page here up in a minute with contact information. Please follow up with one of us specifically for answers to that. And I've also noted your name so we can try to make sure we connect with you as well. So I'm going to start with some of the questions that have already been typed into the chat box, and we'll see how far we can get. Feel free to add more, and we'll get through as many as we can. So Kathy and Mary Lou, I'll just kind of pose these to either of you, and feel free to step in. Do people have to qualify as low income to enroll in Cooking Matters?
The program is designed for low-income individuals, and probably the easiest way to identify folks is, are they SNAP eligible? We don't require that they provide proof of that, but we do tend to work with agencies that serve low-income individuals and know that they are identifying those folks that they serve in the same kind of way. Because everything is free, it's really important for Cooking Matters, and we've agreed with them that those limited resources are made available to those folks that need it the most.
Another question we have is, do you need a commercial kitchen for Cooking Matters and or the demos?
No, you don't. That's a really great question because most of our programs don't have it happen in commercial kitchens. I think we talked briefly about, they could happen in a school cafeteria. They could happen in a staff lounge at a healthcare clinic. Almost anywhere a Cooking Matters class or a demo could happen. We do recommend that all of our volunteers go through the food permit process so that they have, some background in food safety. We ask for our satellites to provide some kind of training in food and knife safety. ServSafe obviously is the most broad way of preparing a volunteer to be able to be knowledgeable about food safety and that kind of thing. But there's no requirement for a particular credential that says that you're food safe certified. But that would be probably the biggest concerns of having a class in one of those situations.
Great. Another question is, what is the criteria for becoming a Cooking Matters location? So dovetailing off of that a bit.
There are so many varieties of types of satellite models. For instance, one of our key satellite players is Access in Medford, which is one of our regional food banks, and they're working with some of their partners that are working with them are OSU and the food bank and in another county and other folks, and a private charter school where they're going to be providing Cooking Matters for kids. So that would be one type. High Desert Food and Farm Alliance is another one of our satellites. So that's more of a community food systems advocacy group in Deschutes County and Bend. But they've taken on both Cooking Matters and our garden education program called Seed to Supper, and are the administrative host for those programs. And then with Mary Lou's program, it's a multi-county Head Start. So it could be whatever. But to get to the actual focus of your question is, it depends. It really is your community ready to bring on the partners necessary to have a Cooking Matters program be sustainable? And that's where we work together. So whomever is asking that question, I encourage you to send me an email and we can kind of continue the conversation there and together identify, is now the time, and do you have the partners ready, and go through like a checklist of questions to ask yourself and those working with you before you jump in.
This next question is pretty fun. I heard an example using a husband and wife team. Are participants allowed to sign up their spouses?
Mary Lou, do you have any examples of that?
What has happened before is some of the moms say, you know, it's easy for me to learn all this, but it's better if my husband hears it too. And so I always welcome them to bring their spouses if they want to. But we always count them as one family when we give out recipes and ingredients. And it's interesting to have the husbands there because they really have a strong voice on what they want to eat. And so it was really great to see, especially with this was a young man, a young couple, had not been married too long, but you know he was so set in his customs and ways that he was really stunned how change can happen and not, you know, fuss about it because it's good.
Thank you.
But we do encourage them that if they want their spouses there to hear the information they're being taught, they're more than welcome to attend. Now, in some cases, I have had single dads come to class. We've done cooking matters, not cooking matters per se, but we've taken some pieces out of it, and we've done it in a family homeless shelter. Where we help these families to transition into eating healthy and making wiser choices. And I mean, that's part of their program being there. And so that's where single dads I have seen most. And let me tell you, they are very well equipped with knowledge. The thing is, they just don't know how to do it. And so we always welcome spouses to come in, or single dads, or whoever's interested.
Thank you, Mary Lou. So I've got two more questions here. One is, have you ever done training so that community members, not staff members of any kind, can do cooking demos at different sites? If so, what have those trainings been like?
Well, maybe I can add to that one. Now, like I mentioned, we've done pieces of Cooking Matters, not necessarily the series, but some of the information in homeless shelters. And so we have education staff from other agencies that have come in, or if we have volunteers. There's sometimes that I get calls from people that are retired and have either done some sort of food prep or nutrition education that call and want to know how they can volunteer, and I utilize them by contributing either by teaching a session or helping with a demo. I mean, it's just whatever's available in your community and who's willing to volunteer.
Thank you so much. And I feel like we have a very appropriate question to end with here. And as one of our speakers answers this question, I'm going to go ahead and switch to another slide that has our contact information. And Kathy, you mentioned some of this information at your last slide, but we got someone who said, we're sold. How do we get started?
That's pretty exciting. So you get started by sending me an email because my phone number isn't up there. And email works great anyway. And we'll just start talking about it. I can send you some information. I'll send you the checklist. I call it the checklist for Cooking Matters Sustainability, which means, you know, just answering, going through this list and say, okay, am I ready to do this? Am I ready to do that? Is this in place? So I'd be very happy to have that conversation. We may find that there's already a satellite partner near you, and connecting with that group would be a first step also, because maybe you can fold into what they're doing right now, you know, kind of have a parallel track going on at the same time. We always have to identify who's going to be the admin contact for registering courses and getting paperwork back into us so that we can send it on to Share Our Strength. So there's a bunch of questions to answer and talk about that will help you get started. And let's do that first through email, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you so much. I want to thank both our speakers today, Kathy Block-Brown and Mary Lou Gutierrez. It has been such a pleasure to share this space with you. Thank you so much. We had an incredible turnout today, and I think both of you might be getting some follow-up emails with some interest and some questions. And before we close out today, I just wanted to say thank you so much. Again, if you have a moment, please sign into that SurveyMonkey and tell us a little bit more about how we can support you. We're really here to aid in building community food systems with you. So tell us what you'd like to learn. And we're going to have an additional webinar this quarter. So either in February or March, we will be having an additional webinar, and it'll be on how to tell your story. And really, it's in preparation for our conference that we're hosting in September called Closing the Hunger Gap. And that's going to be bringing together food advocates, so food bankers, food justice advocates, people working in food systems. It's going to be creating a space for those conversations. And that's September 13th through 16th. And in order to support folks who might want to present at that conference, we're going to be hosting a webinar open to anyone on how to tell your story, how to tell your professional story so that it's engaging to your audience. So we're really looking forward to that. We've got some great partners waiting to teach some storytelling basics and skills. So again, thank you so much. I hope that this was useful. Thank you so much, Kathy and Mary Lou, for your time today. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. You're welcome.